Hey guys, the Lord told me this morning to make a video about hearing His voice. Oh, because I know that there are people who struggle with that. Some people don't know what God's voice is and don't know how to hear it. And I know that in all my other videos, I talk about hearing His voice and following Him. And there are some people who are struggling with that, so I know I have to make a video about how to begin. So the first thing you need to know is that it's actually very simple to hear God's voice. God speaks to us through thoughts. When thoughts pop into our head, that's a spirit speaking. You can get thoughts throughout the day that aren't actually yours. They don't belong to you. You can hear thoughts that come from Satan, and you can hear thoughts that come from God. You can hear thoughts that come from yourself. Either way, if you hear thoughts that come from yourself, then it's your own spirit. If from Satan, then it's Satan's spirit, and if it's from God, then it's God's spirit. Because spirits speak to us through thoughts. That's what their voices sound like, is thoughts. So in order to start hearing God's voice, you have to humble yourself, and you have to have faith that He will speak to you. If you doubt, then you're going to have a lot of trouble, because James says that if someone doubts, they shouldn't expect to receive anything from God. So you have to have faith that God will speak to you. You have to start believing that He's going to communicate, if you want Him to. But if you don't believe He's going to talk to you, then He's not going to talk to you. The other thing is that some people believe that, I'm not even going to address the people who don't believe God can speak that way. That's wrong. That's all you need to know about it. It's wrong. There are other people who believe that if you are in sin, then you can't hear God's voice, but that's actually not true at all. God doesn't discriminate that way. He'll speak to a blatant sinner. He'll even speak to an atheist. And, of course, He will speak to His children, to His people. But whether you're worthy or not, God wants to speak to everyone. So if you want to hear His voice, He will communicate with you. You just have to believe. And the reason I said that He can speak to atheists is because He does take exceptions sometimes. I know of a few stories, but that's for another time. Now, if you want to start engaging in this, then you do this through prayer. You start with prayer. It gets to the point where you're just talking to God all day, every day, wherever you go, whatever you do. But the best place to start is to get focused, get into a quiet place, and just start praying. And prayer isn't about just reading your grocery list to God every day, and it's not about listing all your problems, and it's not about asking Him for things. Prayer is supposed to be a time of communication with God, where you talk to Him and He talks back. So the whole idea in praying is that you would get wisdom from God, you would hear from Him, and you would develop a relationship with Him. If you want to do that, then it has to be two ways. You have to speak to God, and He has to speak back to you. So when you pray, just get on your face and ask Him to talk to you. That's how you start. And believe that He's going to speak back. You can ask Him questions. And now, as you ask Him questions, just pay attention to what thoughts pop into your head. Pay attention to the words that come into your head. Because God speaks to us with fully developed, comprehensible sentences. He can use feelings sometimes. That's called conviction, where He gives you a feeling like you have to do something or you shouldn't do something. He can also lead you to the scriptures, where you feel like, oh, I have to go and read this Bible verse, and then that might be what God wants to show you. But usually, as you follow, what's going to happen is you might not have a Bible around, and God wants to communicate something clearly to you, and He will speak to you using words. So you'll get a thought popping into your head that is a sentence that you can understand, and that's going to be God's Spirit communicating with you. Now, prayer is just you talking back. And then before you know it, you're having a running conversation with God. You're actually communicating with Him. And this just takes practice. You just listen for His voice. Listen to what He's saying, and then follow. Do what He says. Obey Him. Now the issue is that Satan is also a spirit, and he does speak to us the same way by sending thoughts, but it's actually not that difficult to tell the difference usually. The main thing is that it's the content of what's being said. So you can figure out who's speaking by what the content of what's being said. God will always elevate righteousness, and He will always testify of Jesus Christ. Satan will not testify of Jesus Christ, and he will always excuse and justify sin. So when you're listening to a voice and it tells you something, check it against those things. Make sure that you test it. You can even ask a voice who speaks to you. If you hear a thought pop in your head, ask, are you from Jesus Christ? Or is Jesus Christ the Son of God? And depending on what response you get, you'll be able to tell who's speaking. Even apart from this, as you continue conversing with God in your head like that, your senses, your spiritual senses will get more exercised, and you'll start being able to tell the difference between the two. And it becomes very distinct. You'll be able to tell the difference after a while. You'll get very skilled at it. So, but in order to begin, you have to be humble, and you have to believe He's going to start. So get down on your face, pray to the Lord, listen for His voice, and start following, because He will speak to you by a thought in your head. Don't ignore the other ways He speaks to you, but the most important thing is that you follow that voice and you listen for the still small voice inside of your head, because that's the most common way He's going to speak. And if we're not obeying that voice, then we can't really follow, because in order to follow, you have to hear, and in order to hear, you have to listen. So He'll give you instructions throughout the day. He'll teach you things, including how to overcome sin, what you're supposed to be doing throughout the day. He'll encourage you. He'll give you wisdom on things. He'll give you knowledge on things. He might even start showing you people's hearts and saying, that person is really messed up because of this. Or, any number of other things. He can tell you anything. You just have to have faith. You have to be quiet. You have to listen. That's where it starts. So if you guys didn't understand that, or if you thought that God can only speak through the Bible, or He only speaks through feelings, or He'll only speak by an audible voice, and He can do all of these things, then also understand that He will speak to you, the little voice in your head. You have to pay attention to that little voice. Make sure that you recognize that little voice, and you know who's talking. This is not a thing. This is not a question of insanity. You don't need to be diagnosed with some kind of illness because you're hearing voices. That's not what this is about. People are really in the world today don't understand what's going on. There's a spiritual atmosphere around them. There's another realm, and they need to be aware of it, but they're not. Most people don't believe that God can speak to you this way anymore, but He can, and if you hear things, you're not crazy. Pay attention to what's going on, and take comfort. Be encouraged. Start communicating with God and asking Him, Lord Jesus, is that you? And if it's you, speak to me. I want to know the truth. Ask for the truth. That's the main thing. Satan can't give you the truth. Only God can give you the truth. So ask for the truth. And if you receive the truth, that Jesus is the Son of God, then keep on following that voice. Keep on paying attention to what He's saying. Make sure that you obey every single time. So be encouraged, you guys, and Jesus Christ bless you.